And I thought, oh, what's this going to be like? But I knew for me, I needed to do it anyway. I don't like when these are open and I'm like getting myself ready. Thank you. But I knew I needed to do it for me, even if there were only a few of us. And Chris was still so good. He was still so good. And he still was able to go through all the things he needed to go through that gave us what we needed to get out of it. I'm sticking this up my bra. Good morning, everybody. You may notice that I am not Chuck cussing. You may not notice that, but you might. Chuck is not feeling well this morning, so he is watching from home, which is a good reason for us to turn to the camera and say, hi, Chuck, and everybody else watching us online. We're so glad that you all are joining us this morning, whether you are online or whether you are in person. This is our second Sunday of Lent. And because I got this question, purple, I need to say with the microphone, purple is the color of the season of Advent and Lent. So this beautiful stole that Dayspring Baptist Church bought me, I get to wear twice a year. Well, more than twice, but 2 seasons of year, which makes me very, very happy. So thank you again for this. I was at a pastor's retreat all week long. It was supposed to be Monday through Wednesday, but then everybody needed to leave, and the guy who owned the cabin was like, hey, nobody's checking in until Friday, so if anybody wants to stay a little bit longer, you can. By the way, the guy who owned the cabin was Chris Fillingham, the former pastor of this church. So I said, Chris, I would love to stay just a little bit longer, so I actually got to stay an additional 24 hours or so all by myself in a cabin on the lake. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I have 3 very young children at home. So the quiet and the peace was like, everybody's like, are you going to be lonely? And I said, no, no, I am not. But what I realized is by the end of my extra day there all by myself, I actually was starting to get a little bit lonely. And not in the sense of, I wish there were other people here, but in the sense of, this is such a special thing and I wish I had somebody else to share it with. I wish my kids could see this lake. I wish my husband was here to enjoy the peace. And I was just kind of sitting in that paradox of, I love this, I love being alone, and also I miss my family at the same time. I'm so glad they're not here, and also I kind of wish they were here, but also I'm so glad they're not here. And I just thought, so much of life feels paradoxical sometimes. And that's the season of Lent too. We're building up to Easter Sunday. It's one of the most special days of the entire year, especially for people who are Christians. And yet, this season of Lent leading up to it is a season of confession and a season of contemplation. And even though we're building to this massive celebration, right now we're kind of sitting in some other feelings. So I really appreciated what Lindsay said last week, which was, whatever you walk into this room with today, whether you're coming in with joyous celebration because you got a week alone away from your family or whatever it may be, or whether you're walking in feeling kind of sad and kind of down because of other things, I just hope you know that every feeling is welcome in here. Every situation is welcome in here. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. You can feel what you're feeling and be who you are, and you are welcome, and we are so grateful that everybody's here. Would you please join me in our call to worship from Psalm 103 that you can see in your worship guide? I will read the light print, and then you are invited to join me in the bold print. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in love. God does not treat us as our sins deserve, or repay us according to our iniquities. How great is God's steadfast love for us, as high as the heavens above the earth. How far does God remove our transgressions from us? As far as the east is from the west. How then will we respond to this goodness of God? We will lift up our hearts and lift up our lives. May we lift them up to the Lord in worship this morning.
sing with me?
Lord, have mercy upon us. Christ, have mercy upon us. Lord, have mercy upon us.
Join me in the unison confession. For the things I have done and the things I have left undone, for my lack of compassion and my lack of courage, for the fears that keep me trapped and the gloom that hangs over me, for the uncertainty I face and the healing I need. Sing together again.
Lord, have mercy upon us. Christ, have mercy upon us. Lord, have mercy upon us.
This scripture reading is from the Gospel of John, chapter 16, verses 19 through 22, and then 32 through 33. When Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this. So he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a while you will see me'? Very truly, I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of the joy that a child is born into the world. So with you, now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy." And then going down to verse 32. A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. The Spirit is speaking to the church.
Will you stand and sing with me?
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back,
seated.
Good morning. I'm here to share with you a little bit about our adventure into the city almost 2 weeks ago with Street Patrol. But first, let's think about 1 Peter chapter 4. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Now imagine a cold evening, a windy evening, and a campfire. Now in your imagination, do not include hat, gloves, s'mores, hot dogs, or a warm place to go when the wind picks up and the fire dies out. This is the reality of the unhoused in our city. Now imagine folks arriving to offer a modest sack lunch, new socks, those desperately needed gloves, hats, a pair of sweatpants, a flashlight, a piece of cardboard to sleep on, or a bigger score, perhaps a sleeping bag or a small propane tank. This is the reality every other Monday for the unhoused in our city. This immediate, authentic ministry is provided by a group known as Street Patrol, and we had the honor, I think it was a real privilege, to distribute the items that this congregation generously provided. And we went into the city in the evening with a group who does this every other week, and they know the route and they know where encampments of homeless have gathered. And they do gather as communities, for as they're moved from one place to another by the city, they want to stay together with the friends they have made. Sometimes you hear a thank you, and sometimes you hear a God bless you, and sometimes you don't hear that. You might see it in their eyes, you might not. But witnessing this need is great, and it continues year-round. The missions team is proposing to continue our contributions through March, and you will see bins in the narthex for collecting items, and there will be more announcements about opportunities for us to assemble lunch bags, and then for others to distribute the gifts that we collect on the streets in St. Louis. So I have a long list of personal care items, from deodorant and mouthwash and wet wipes and lip balm and Band-Aids to flashlights and batteries and blankets, of course, and the list is long. We have collected blue bags. We have provided blue bags, so if you take one home, you can put your items in it and we'll remind you to bring it back. And please bring it back if you want to help in this important ministry. And as Peter continues, we know that if anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides. So do keep Street Patrol in your prayers, and if you're able, to help out with those opportunities. And now I'm going to change hats and lead the profession of faith. Please join me in the bold print. We have been crucified with Christ, and we no longer live, but Christ lives in us. The life we live in the body, we live by faith in the Son of God, who loved us and gave himself for us. Amen. Oh, can I do one more thing out of order? The folks who went into the city, if I could just ask you to stand, not for recognition, but if you're willing to answer questions from other members, or you can tell about your experience on the streets that evening. You can just look around and see all of the folks from Dayspring who went that evening. Thank you.
As it reads in our worship guide, we continue our Lenten exploration this morning with a desire to better understand the cross of Christ. As we engage this holy conversation, we ask you, Lord, to keep us from the temptation of believing in the sufficiency of reading without unction, of speculation without devotion, of investigation without wonder, observation without joy, understanding without humility, and knowledge without love. We wish to be carried into the divine life, and thus we ask for grace more than instruction, for desire more than understanding, and for the groaning of prayer more than diligent reading. May we seek not light, but fire that totally inflames us and carries us into the life of the divine.
Will you stand and sing with me? Take up your cross, lose yourself. Take up your cross, find yourself. Take up your cross, lose your life. Take up your cross, find your life. Take up your cross, follow me. Take up your cross, lose yourself. Take up your cross, find yourself. Take up your cross, lose your life. Take up your cross, find your life. Take up your cross, follow me. May be seated.
Good morning, everyone. So today I will be reading from Leviticus chapter 16, verses 20 through 22. I am reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Now, one note before I begin. This reading begins with the word he. The he in this case refers to Aaron, the brother of Moses. Here then is the passage. When he has finished atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat. Then Aaron shall lay both of his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the Israelites and all their transgressions, all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat and sending it away to the wilderness by means of someone designated for the task. The goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to a barren region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. The Spirit is speaking to the church.
Okay. I have to say this out loud, Steve. Y'all don't know this because you weren't sitting as close as I was, but there's a bug on this candle right here, okay? And I kept waiting for it to just go up in flames as it crawled to the top of the candle. So it's not moving, I'm not touching it, but if it flies, I will scream and run away. You just need to be prepared. It's not the Holy Spirit, it's a bug, okay? For Christmas this year, I asked for a large water cup with a handle. That's what I wanted. I had seen Kathy Pettibone carrying one of those to our staff meetings, and it looked very convenient, like it could hold tons of water with the convenience of a nice little handle, and so that is what I wanted for Christmas. So imagine my delight as I open a package from my in-laws, and I pull out this. Ooh, that's right. That's the good response. Ooh. So it was in this very thick black box, this quite classy packaging, and I was like, oh, this just feels like a really big deal. And my husband said, yeah, actually, it is a big deal. And I said, it is? And he goes, yeah, apparently every middle school girl wanted a Stanley Cup for Christmas this year. I was like, great. Fantastic. I didn't necessarily need a Stanley. I just wanted a cup with handles like Kathy had. And oddly enough, this is where we're going to, I can't even keep that there because y'all can't even, it's so big that I can't see you. Oddly enough, this is where our atonement theory starts for today. Last week, as you all know, we're going over different atonement theories for these 6 weeks during Lent. And last week's atonement theory centered around the work of Anselm of Canterbury and John Calvin, who are these early medieval church fathers. But this week's theory comes from a man named René Girard. He was this famous French anthropologist and philosopher, among other things. And whereas Anselm and Calvin died hundreds of years ago, René Girard died in 2015. So, this one is a little bit recent. This atonement theory has only emerged within the last 60 years. And the most interesting thing about this atonement theory that we're talking about today is that René Girard was not trying to develop an atonement theory. That wasn't his goal. He was an anthropologist. He wasn't even a Christian, actually. He was researching human societies throughout the years to look at anthropology and philosophy, and he was looking specifically for the philosophy of desire in anthropology. The philosophy of desire in anthropology. So what he did is he was looking at literature and mythology across genres and across cultures and across time periods to see if he could find any similar structural patterns throughout all of human civilization. So again, literature and mythology across genres and cultures and time periods to see if he could identify any similar structural patterns that are just common to all of humanity. Now, before we really get into it, because I'm going to have to give you a bit of an anthropology lesson, but before we get into it, I feel like this sermon has a lot of explaining, not a whole lot of sermonizing. So it might feel more like a lesson here for a little bit, but I think if you hang with me, we're going to be okay. I just keep hearing Ricky Ricardo's voice in my mind. You have a lot of splaining to do. I don't think that was a good accent, but I heard it anyway. We have a lot of splaining to do. So I'm going to do some splaining for us this morning. Girard's research scanned decades. It was his entire life's work, and so his theory built as the research continued. But I'm going to start by telling you kind of what he postures, which is his anthropological research. And what he says is, across time and cultures, the one thing that all of human society had, that he saw over and over again, is what he calls mimetic rivalry. Mimetic meaning mimicking. Meaning if you have something, I want that too. And maybe that is an object like a Stanley Cup. Or maybe that is a piece of land that you have that I also want. Or maybe it's something more ethereal like your power or your influence. But he says human beings tend to mimic each other. We tend to look like each other, and we tend to want what each other has. But part of the human condition is this desire. This is where his philosophy of desire comes from. And what he says is this desire leads to rivalry. When we all want the same thing, we are stop fighting for it. Think about the Super Bowl. If both teams didn't want to win, there would be no rivalry, right? But they both want the same thing. This is where the rivalry comes from. And we see this evidence everywhere, especially in literature. We have it in our Bible with Cain and Abel. We have it in the mythology of Remus and Romulus, who were twin brothers who founded ancient Rome. We see it in the story of Oedipus, which is Greek. We see it in the Babylonian creation myth, Hebrew, Greek, Roman, Babylonian. Across times and cultures, he found this to be true. Heck, y'all, we even see it in our neighborhoods and our high schools. We have Stanley Cups. Okay, so these are all the rage right now. And the Today Show actually called it a Stanley Cup craze. The Stanley Cup craze. Hashtag Stanley has been used more than 3 billion times. Billion, that's right, Kathy, I saw that face. Billion times across social media platforms. And if you go to that hashtag, you will see videos of like people getting this for Christmas, and their response is like the response of people the first time they saw the Beatles. Like, they are just crying because they are so excited that they got a Stanley Cup. Now, do not hear me judging them, okay? I'm just telling you the reality of the situation. For some reason, this Stanley Cup has become a really big deal. It has almost become a status symbol. And because of this mimetic rivalry, because humanity imitates one another, everybody wants one. We all desire the same thing. And what happens, says Rene Girard, is that as that rivalry grows, the tensions build and build and build until eventually they kind of erupt into violence. We see this in those mythologies too. We know the story of Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel. Remus and Romulus in the founding of ancient Rome, one of them murdered the other. Oedipus in Greek murdered his father. The Babylonian myth, Marduk murdered Tiamat. Like, this desire builds and builds until it comes out in violence. And the problem is that when this desire is present throughout all of society, not just between two people, but among everyone, then as the tension builds, it has the possibility to erupt in mass violence, like community-wide chaos. Think mob violence that could take down entire societies. Rene Girard calls this a contagion. He says that the violence can spread from society to society, and it is like a contagion. Now, I told you he wasn't a Christian, that he wasn't trying to create an atonement theory. This is just his anthropological research. But to Girard, this societal violence is like our equivalent of original sin. It's the thing he found throughout all of humanity for all of time, this desire that erupts into violence. And to him, this is the problem that humanity needs to address: violence. So violence in this atonement theory is the contagion. Violence is like the disease, the societal disease that needs to be addressed. And as Girard's research continued, he discovered that societies actually figured out a way to handle this tension. They created what he calls a mechanism for quelling the tension before it erupts into mob violence, kind of like the switch on a pressure cooker. I am not the cook. I don't do this in my family. But I do know that if you have a pressure cooker, you're not just supposed to like take that lid off as soon as it's done, right? Because things will potentially, explode all over your kitchen, I think? I don't know. I hope none of us have ever experienced what happens. But they have a little switch, right? And you release the pressure switch, and it releases some of the pressure, so then when you take the lid off, nothing explodes. So Girard says societies came up with this pressure release valve, and it is called the scapegoat mechanism. We're probably all familiar with that term, scapegoat, but maybe we're surprised to know that it was in the scriptures that Josh read for us earlier. We hear a lot about the sacrificial lamb. We talk about how Jesus is the sacrificial lamb of God, which, by the way, is another atonement theory. We'll get to that. But I didn't know until I was in seminary that the scapegoat goes alongside the lamb. So if you'll remember what he read, on the Day of Atonement, which happens one day a year, the high priest does other things with a different goat, but with the scapegoat, the high priest brings the goat in, and he puts his hands on the head, and he confesses all of society's sins onto the scapegoat. Not individual sins, not like little Johnny lied to his mom yesterday, but like the sins of the community as a whole. And he lays them on the head of the goat as if he's imbuing them onto that goat, and then he releases the goat into the wilderness. They expel the goat from the community, and that's like the symbol of them expelling the community's sins. It happens one day a year. It's a ritual, but that's what happens with the scapegoat. So that's one version of the scapegoat mechanism. And what Girard says is that this is what all of society's found a way to do, except, unfortunately, not with animals. They found a way to do this with people. They realized that if they could put all the blame on one person or one group of people and then expel them out of the society, then the tensions would calm down. We know this is where we get our term scapegoat. But societies as a whole would pick a person or a group of people, and the societies would delude themselves into believing that this person or group of people is responsible for all of society's ills. So if they could just get rid of that person or group of people, everything would get better. And once they expelled them, the tensions would go down. And so this would happen. We see this over and over throughout history. We see this in the Salem witch trials. We see this in the Jews in Nazi Germany. We see this in the lynching of Black Americans. We see this all across society, and it was horrible, and it was violent, and it was wrong. But it's what societies throughout history began to do, Renee says, to quell the tension. So if violence is the disease, scapegoating is the vaccine. Violence is the disease, scapegoating is the vaccine. Only the problem is vaccines don't always work, right? Or they stop working over time. And this is what happened. What happened is that people would have to go back and scapegoat again and again and again because they would scapegoat, the tensions would fall, then over time the tensions would build again, and then suddenly they needed a new scapegoat. And so the cycle just continued itself over and over. They even created whole religions on this basis of sacrificing so that we could sacrifice ritually, so that every year we did this, so the tensions never got bigger. It became something they started to do preemptively to keep the tension down. Okay, so this is all the anthropology part. That is a lot. That's a lot. And what Renee says is that religions did this, and they began to believe that it was sanctioned by God, the scapegoating. That this is what God wants us to do to make our society better. Because we all believe that those people are guilty. Let's get them out. Tensions calm down. God must be happy with us. Whew. Okay, feels heavy. I feel like I should tell a joke. Why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7 ate 9, right? Which is a great joke, unless 7 ate 9 because 9 was being scapegoated and 7 thought he had to eat 9 in order to keep the tension down in society, in which case it's not a joke, it's an anthropological reality. That didn't work well, did it? So like I said, the interesting thing about this atonement theory is that Girard wasn't a Christian. He wasn't trying to explain or understand the cross. He was trying to understand all of human society. But then something incredible happened. In the midst of all this research, Girard began to look at our faith. He began to look at the Bible. He began to look at the history of the Hebrew Bible moving into the Gospels of the New Testament. And with all his research, he says that Christianity is the only religion that does it different. The only religion that changes this scapegoat mechanism. Okay, so now we're moving from his anthropological research into this theory of atonement. Here's what Girard says. Jesus is the scapegoat. We know this. It was the Roman government, it was the religious leaders that wanted Jesus to die because there was rising religious tension in society, and the religious leaders were willing to sacrifice Jesus, the rebel, in the hopes of bringing the tension down. And society as a whole was happy to crucify Jesus. The mob believed that he was worthy of it. They were shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." They had Barabbas released in his place. This is part of the scapegoat mechanism. Society has to believe that the scapegoat is guilty, even though society is wrong on that. And so they did. But this is where the similarity stops, because first, Unlike every other mythology or piece of literature that he found, our Bible, including the Old Testament and the New Testament, tells some of its stories from the perspective of the victims. This is different. So when Cain killed Abel, the Bible never says that Abel deserved to die. We know that Abel was innocent. When Joseph was accused of doing something inappropriate with Potiphar's wife and he has to be expelled from the society, we believe that Joseph was innocent. The Bible never says that he was guilty. This is different. This is a different type of scapegoat mechanism where we're hearing from the perspectives of the victims. And then we get to Jesus, and our gospel writers maintain the entire time that Jesus is innocent, that Jesus did not deserve to die. They tell the whole story from the underside of the power, not coming in from the power up top. Our gospel writers maintain that Jesus was innocent, even though the crowd didn't. And here's the other thing that really got to Rene Girard in his research. For the first time ever, he found in our gospels that they separated the sacred from the violent. And I'm going to say that again. Our gospel writers never once claimed that Jesus' death appeased God. They never once claimed that we needed the violence in order to make God happy. That's part of the scapegoat mechanism. We need the sacrifice in order to appease the deity. Girard says the Gospels don't say that. The Gospels are the only place in literature where he found that they separated the sacred from the violent. So our faith doesn't teach that we needed a sacrifice in order to appease an angry God, which is the atonement theory we heard last week. Instead, our faith teaches that our God became the sacrifice. The deity wasn't appeased by the scapegoat. The deity was the scapegoat. I'm going to say that again. The deity wasn't appeased by the scapegoat. God was the scapegoat. And what Girard came to decide is that this was God holding up a mirror to us, saying all of your scapegoat mechanisms that you've created throughout all of history, they do not work. Because you had to keep going and they became a cycle. They do not work. The only way to reject the violence is to do what Jesus did and completely turn all the way away from it, to do a complete withdrawal from the violence. So this atonement theory that came out of Girard's research says if violence is the disease and the scapegoat mechanism is the vaccine, Jesus and the way of Jesus is the cure. If violence is the disease and the mechanism was the vaccine, Jesus and his example and his life and his teachings, those are the cure. So as I'm finishing up today, here are the things I love about this atonement theory, which is called the scapegoat theory or sometimes the mirror theory because it holds up a mirror to society. The emphasis is not on his death atoning for personal sins. The emphasis of Jesus' death is on the plague that encompasses all of society. Just like the scapegoat in the Hebrew Bible was for the whole society's sins, Jesus' death is much larger than just my personal sins. It addresses the reality of our society and it breaks down the myth of redemptive violence. Girard says there's no such thing as redemptive violence. I also love that this makes us, I'm going to say this again. Girard says there's no such thing as redemptive violence. The only way to end the cycle is to completely withdraw from violence altogether. And he says that's what Jesus did on the cross. Show us to completely withdraw from it. I also love this theory because it makes us re-examine our goats. I'm going to say that again. It makes us re-examine our goats. Who are the people in society that we blame for all of society's ills? Who are the people or the group of people that we say, well, if they would just be gone, things would get better? Or if we could just handle this, things would get better? We still scapegoat today. We still follow this mechanism today. Scapegoating is very much alive and present. Societal violence is very much alive and present, but by holding up a mirror to us with Jesus' death and Jesus' life, he gives us the opportunity to change the societal narrative. He gives us the opportunity to choose something different, to not lean into the myth of redemptive violence, to not blame any one person or group of people for our ills. He encourages us to live into his own way of this radical nonviolence, trusting that the way of Jesus is the way that the world needs. Here's the thing that I think is really cool, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, because again, it was a lot of splaining. Rene Girard actually became a Christian as a result of this research. He did not start out that way. He wasn't looking to become one. But in the midst of all of his research, finding that our gospels did something different than just about every other civilization he had researched, that the God of the Bible, that Jesus Christ broke that scapegoat mechanism once and for all, Rene became a practicing Roman Catholic and stayed that way for the rest of his life, even though he didn't set out to create this atonement theory. It still changed his life. This story of Jesus, this way of Jesus, changed his life. And y'all call me naive, but I think it can change ours too. And I think it can change the world if we would really follow the ways of Jesus. Amen.
You stand and sing with me. Will you come and follow me if I but call your name? Will you go where you don't know and never be the same? Will you let my love be shown? Will you let my name be known? Will you let my life be grown in you and you in me? Will you leave yourself behind if I but call your name? Will you care for cruel and kind and never be the same? Will you risk the hostile stare should your life attract or scare? Will you let me answer prayer in you and you in me? Lord, your summons echoes true when you but call my name. Let me turn and follow you and never be the same. In your company I'll go where your love and footsteps show. Thus I'll move and live and grow in you and you in me.
As you may remember from last week, we have decided to partake in communion every week during Lent. This is not what we normally do, but we wanted to try it. But we also wanted to try doing it in different ways. So one of the things we're going to try to do today, which you are invited to do, but no one has to do, is we invite you to make this a little bit more of a contemplative moment. So we only have one communion server, and it's going to be me. And I'm going to be standing up here, and what you're invited to do once that music starts is you can take a moment to pray. You can read the contemplative quote that we have. You're also invited to come and sit on one of our front rows here and take a moment to center yourself either before or after you take communion. So if you'd like to come take it and sit before you go back to your seat, if you'd like to come sit and when you feel ready, come up and take it, or if you'd like to walk up, take it and go back and sit down. You can do this however you'd like. And again, everyone in this room is invited. No one is obligated, so please don't feel like you have to. But as we enter this communion time, I really get stuck by that quote from Rene Girard that says, the deity wasn't appeased by the sacrifice. The deity was the sacrifice. God wasn't appeased by this violence. God made himself subject to it, to release us from it, to set us free. Everything he did out of love for us. So as we come to the table together today, and you know what, y'all? I'm killing the bug, okay? It was still here. Violence, oh dear. We'll deal with that next week, okay? I'm killing it. I'm covering it with a rock, so I'm burying it in honor. Okay. As we do come to this table together today, Jesus took the bread when he was sitting at that table with his disciples, and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave it to them saying, "This is my body broken for you, for the world. Do this in remembrance of me." And likewise, after supper, he took the cup, and as he poured it and passed it, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood, poured out for the forgiveness of many. Take and drink, and do this in remembrance of me." Whenever you're ready, from wherever you are, you're invited to come take communion this morning.
We have many announcements this morning for Life of the Church. Tonight we have children, young children, manna, youth, starting at 5 with dinner, and then at 5:30, Moms Next, and the new adult Bible study will start. So atonement theories, if you have questions or grievances to air on this, just come tonight. Andrea will be ready for you. On Tuesday, the lunch bunch is meeting here at church, and so bring your lunch, and about noon, everyone can gather and enjoy lunch together. Saturday morning, on March 2nd, this coming Saturday, is the church-wide spring cleaning. It'll be a fun spring cleaning. It's not like at home where it's your own stuff. It's just better if it's someone else's stuff. So please sign up or let Steve know if you can come. There will be tasks for all ages and abilities, so come and lend a hand. It's also great if you would like to know what's behind secret doors. This is the time to find out. So just come, and there will be pizza for lunch. So highly recommend. Also next Saturday, we have Parents' Night Out. So make sure you sign up and pay in advance for that. And then Brenda is looking for Easter candy donations, peanut-free and small enough to fit into a plastic egg. You can drop that off downstairs in the kids area or in the church office between now and March 17th. And last but not least, on Tuesday, March 5th, there is a blood drive that will be happening here through the American Red Cross. So if you are able to give blood, that is a great way to care for our neighbors. If you are a little nervous about it, it's a great environment. You're comfortable here. It's a familiar place. So please sign up. There's in our weekly emails, you can sign up to have a slot to donate blood.
Y'all, for those of you who come to the adult Bible study when we've had it before, you know that John Bowley is just a wonderful human being. And you know that John has some great thoughts. I'm picking on you. I didn't warn you about this, but I'm doing it anyway. John caught me in the office before church this morning, and he said, my issue with all atonement theories is that they all start from this place of separation from God, that we are separated. And I said, actually, today's doesn't start like that. Today's doesn't treat it as if there's a separation. It treats it as if there is a disease from humanity that needs a cure. It's one of the things I love about looking at all these different atonement theories, that we get pieces of truth out of all of them, and hopefully it gives us a broader, bigger picture of the incredible work that Christ did for us on that cross. So thank you for being here. I hope you'll come back next week. I hope I didn't scare you away with all my explaining of Renee Girard's anthropology. But as we leave today, would you please stand, and we're going to sing our Lenten benediction together. And I chose this song and this verse of this song for our benediction because everything Christ did for us on that cross, he did out of love. So let's sing together.